Hello everybody, Chris here, and in this video I wanted to show you guys an interesting transitions pack for DaVinci Resolve 16. So out of the box, DaVinci Resolve gives you a handful of transitions that you can apply to your clips as you cut from one clip to another to make the transition smoother. For most basic purposes, those will work. However, if you want to create a more interesting transition, it can take you quite a bit of time in order to generate that in the Fusion tab using node compositions. So with this visual pack by rVisual, you can get access to a bunch more camera-based transition effects. So if I go ahead and hit play on the timeline, you'll be able to see previews of the visual effects before you actually add them to your timeline clips as a transition effect. So you can see that these transitions are a lot more involved than the basic ones you get out of DaVinci Resolve 16 by default. So once you apply it to your clips, which I'll show you how to do in a minute here, you will be able to get the same motion, but with whatever clips you want. So for instance, and you'll notice that they also come with sound effects. And then over here, we have another transition. And then playing it back one more time. So right now for these transitions, I currently have them grouped together as a compound clip. And that's so that they can be pre-rendered so that I could show you that without exporting it. That's the little blue bar you see at the top of the timeline there. But if I was to go to this compound clip over here on the right and break it apart, decompose in place, you'll see that these effects are composed of an adjustment clip layer, which goes and sits on top of your video clips that you want to cut between. And I think all of them also have the sound effect as well. So with those adjustment clip layers, you can go over to the Fusion tab and actually play around with some of the settings. So you don't get a massive amount of settings here, but enough to customize the effect to your liking. And then you'll see this little X in the center that is the pivot point for a lot of these effects will have a pivot point. So if you were to use an effect with a camera rotation around the center, then the pivot point would be the center for that effect. So before I show you guys how to set up the transitions pack, so if you're interested in picking up the pack, you can find it at store.visual.cz, and I'll put a link in the description. And I also have a 15% discount code you guys can use. I'm not actually making any money off of that. I was only requested to do a quick review on the pack for fun, but if you have interest in using the kind of effects I've been showing you guys in this video so far, I think that the price he's asking for there is not too unreasonable at all, because creating these kind of transition effects is probably going to take you more than an hour of time by scratch, and that's if you're only going to use one of them once. So just take that into consideration. Okay, so if you did decide to pick up the pack and you want to install it, you're going to receive it as a zip archive file. I think currently it's on version 1.2. I haven't downloaded the latest version. But if you open this up, you're going to get a folder in here. So inside of the zip file, you're going to get all of the media files for the transitions, as well as the settings for those transitions so that they can be used in your videos. So what we need to do is load this up as a separate DaVinci Resolve project and then enable dynamic switching so that we can move these files freely over to our actual project. So you can take the folder inside of here and store it anywhere on your computer that you want. I would suggest you find a permanent home for it. One possibility could be your Documents folder on Windows 10 into the Blackmagic Design folder, which I believe exists there as default. And then go over to DaVinci Resolve, and I created a custom folder here called Transitions and stored the pack inside of that. Just to redo the steps and show you guys as a tutorial, I'll extract this to the desktop, and I'll call this Camera Move Pack Tutorial. So once you have the pack extracted where you want it to go, we need to load it up into DaVinci Resolve as a new project. So once we have the pack extracted somewhere, we're going to need to go into DaVinci Resolve and to import it as a project archive. So to do that, I'm going to go into the DaVinci Resolve editor, go up to File, Project Manager, and then on the project list, I'm going to go below the bottom project, right click and do Restore Project Archive. So when we do that, we find the project we want to import. So on my desktop, I have the camera pack here. I'm just going to go into the first folder there and hit open. And then after a minute, we should see that import here as a new project. So in order to take this or any other project and enable it for dynamic switching of projects, we right click on the project and then enable dynamic. So next we need to double click and open the project up and enable dynamic project switching. So inside of the project, you'll see the pack of transitions for different FPS variants. And we're going to want to copy this into our actual project. So in order to do that, we use the project manager in order to enable the dynamic project switching. So to do that, we click on the Project Manager button in the bottom right-hand corner. And then you want to right-click on the Transitions project and enable Dynamic Project Switching if it has not already been enabled. You can see that a project is loaded up for the dynamic switching because it will have the check mark next to the project name there. Once you have it enabled once and you open up a new project, such as, let's say, the Camera Transitions Test project here, then this project will also be opened up with the dynamic project. So what that allows you to do is to switch between projects without re-entering the project manager. So you have both projects loaded up in memory. So I can go to the Camera Move Pack tutorial, which we just imported here. And there we have all of the transitions. So if I want to take those into another project, I simply go Control-C on this folder to copy it. Then I go back to the project where I'm actually editing my video, up at the top with the drop-down menu. And I hit Control-V to paste it into the media pool. So you can see here now that I have a copy of the transitions pack. And it's important to do it this way because it will also import all of the project settings for those transitions so that they can work properly. Next, you're going to want to find the version of the transition that matches your FPS. So you can find your current project frame rate by going up to the File menu and choosing Project Settings. And you'll be able to see timeline frame rate, playback frame rate, and video format. More than likely lined up with the same FPS. So the 25 here represents 25 frames per second. And that will be how you know that you should grab the 25 frames per second version. Alternatively, if you're working on a YouTube video, you might be working at 30 FPS, so just keep in mind whatever frame rate you're using so you grab the right transition. So if you want to preview these transitions, a really good way would be to switch over to thumbnail mode, clicking here in the media pool, and then that'll allow you to see and preview each of these animations. So if we hover over them and scrub through their timeline, you can see what the effect looks like. And obviously you've got quite a few here to play around with. So when you find one you like, you simply left-click and drag it onto the timeline. And that's going to have a clip with an audio clip. But what you'll notice is that this still has that preview video there. And we don't actually want the preview to be in our final video. We just want the effect without the visual graphic. So how you separate it is to right-click on the clip and choose Decompose in Place. So that'll move the video in the preview to its own separate layer. And now the effect itself is in this adjustment clip layer, which can be positioned over any two video clips to make the transition happen. So we can actually just cut away the preview video completely. I'll select it and cut it away with Control-X. And now we just need some video clips to cut between. Okay, so I have these two clips here, one of a dirt buggy and one of a city skyline, both pretty normal stock clips. And the idea is you just position this effect now over those video clips. Now in some versions of the pack, there's also supposed to be a little orange marker that goes here to indicate exactly what frame the two bottom clips that are making the cut should be positioned for the transition to look right. So if you don't see that, you may just have to play around with it a little bit in order to get it just right. So now we can go ahead and hit play over the transition and see how that will look. You can see that if it hasn't been pre-rendered, it can be quite laggy. So if you want the effect to play back much smoother in your video timeline before an export, then enabling pre-rendering and creating a composite clip so that it can pre-render the effect is a pretty good idea. So as the official tutorials for this pack recommend, you can do that by creating a couple cuts at the edges of the transition, but for the bottom clips that you're putting the transition on. So I'm going to slice those. And now we select all of the video clips, right click and do a new compound clip. So I'll give this a name, Transition Effect 1, pretty generic. And we'll go up to the playback menu so that we can enable the render cache. So render cache should be set to user. Smart is also a possible option, but user will give us direct control over it. With this effect, I want to make sure it pre-renders, so I'm going to right-click it, find the Render Cache Fusion output menu, and change it from Auto to On. So once you do that, you should see a red or a blue bar appear up here at the top. You can see it going ahead and rendering in the backgrounds there. In order for it to play back smoothly, it needs to turn completely blue. That can take longer depending on which effect you're using. But once it's done, if we go back a little bit with our timeline cursor and hit play, we should be able to see the effect smoothly transition from one clip to the other. So with it pulled up a little bit bigger in the timeline, let's play it back one more time, and you can see the transition is quite smooth. And there's a lot of effects to play around with here. So I think that this could definitely be an interesting pack for you to check out if you are interested in adding cool transitions to your video. You don't want to spend a tremendous amount of time doing manual customization for it, or you just don't know how yet. And if you can follow the steps I just went through, I think you'll pretty much be good to go there. There's not too much more to it. And me, myself, I was pretty much following the official tutorials for the pack as well, which are included as video files when you download it. So once again, if you have any interest in the pack, there's going to be a link in the description and a coupon code which gets you 15% off of the pack's price. Let me know what you think of this review in the comments if you do want me to look more at other third-party packs for DaVinci Resolve or other programs. Let me know. I've been Chris, thanks for watching, and I will see you guys in my future video content.